You're listening to a special presentation from Night of the Living podcast, Zoned Out, the Twilight Zone, revisited with Joe and Freddy. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Freddy. How you doing?
I'm all right. We got a powerhouse of an episode, the big season 2 finale of the Twilight Zone.
This is a big one. This is a big one.
It speaks to themes that we'll get into. Basically, the theme of suppression of the people is the big one. Air date June 2nd, 1961. This is the first of 4 episodes directed by Elliot Silverstein. So we're getting some fresh talent in. Later on, he's going to do The Passerby, The Trade-Ins, and Spur of the Moment. He was known for Cat Ballou, was his big movie in 65. And then in the 70s, he made A Man Called Horse. And then a movie that is okay, but it's one of those ones I go back to occasionally, is The Car from 77 with the elder Brolin, where it's about the evil car. If you've never seen that one, it's maybe the first time I've seen like a movie where the subject was an evil sentient like car. If I remember right, I think it was kind of like Christine, but yeah, but not as good. No, not nearly as good. This episode was written by Serling. It has a cast of 11. Only 7 are credited. That's our lead, Romney Wordsworth, a librarian, an obsolete man, also known as a carpenter in the story. Third of 4 appearances by Burgess Meredith. We first saw him as Henry Bemis in Time Enough at Last. Then he was in Mr. Dingle the Strong. And we'll see him in the future in Printer's Devil before he leaves the zone. Then we have Chancellor, who a chancellor is like a senior state official, if you don't know what that means. He's an authoritarian. The second of 2 appearances by Fritz Weaver. We already saw him as William Sturka in Third from the Sun.
I'll note too on the side that chancellor is often a phrase people associate with Germany.
Yeah,
because that was it's basically the prime minister in Germany. But that's I think that was in a very intentional use of the phrase chancellor.
They use it in Star Wars a lot too, like Chancellor Valorum, no confidence. Then there's the subaltern, which is the chancellor's second, his like right hand man, who's at his at a smaller podium in front of the giant podium. This is the first of 2. Yeah, what's that, Joe?
We just call him the chancellor's sub.
The chancellor's sub
might have some additional connotations these days, but yes,
this is the first of 2 appearances by Joseph Ellick, and it is not Joseph, it's Joseph. He's also going to come back in one more pallbearer. He was an actor. He's known for playing Bancini in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if you're a fan, but great movie. One of the many great actors in that movie. He was also in Black Rain, which rocks, with Michael Douglas, I think. Good action movie from the 80s. And then The Producers, great comedy. So he's done it all. Such a small part in this, though.
I'm sorry. I'm still stuck on Joseph because that's what Joe Coy said his mom referred to him as.
Oh, is Joseph?
Joseph.
Yeah.
But I think his was more of like a family cultural thing. But
yeah, I think
anyway,
maybe this guy might have been from, descended from another language.
Okay.
I'm thinking
Joe Coy's mom was Filipino, so
I wonder where Joseph Ellick got his name.
I don't know.
The guard character, one of the guards that you see is Harry Fleer. He's going to come back in Once Upon a Time. Is the only reason I mentioned him is because he does return. Not a lot of notes to open this one. I found it interesting that when they investigate somebody to determine if they're obsolete, that they follow them for 1 year and 11 months. And then I guess that 12th month is the trial portion of it before they render you obsolete and take away your entire life.
That was an interesting detail of like maybe due process in that world or something,
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, so you're given all this time to prove that you can continue to live the life you currently have, basically. Right. In this episode, Wordsworth goes even further than that. Very biblical kind of moment. The Blu-ray commentary in this episode is really great because it's Matthew Weiner, who created Mad Men. So you can hear a lot of like how this episode and Serling influenced his work. And he's joined by Mark Scott Zickery. He wrote the guide to Twilight Zone, or Twilight Zone Companion, I believe it's called. Do the Blu-ray, and it's really good. If you have it, I recommend watching that. This is maybe the briefest intro I've had to an episode. It's funny compared to last week's. The intro was like 20 minutes long or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like we need to get into this to really talk about the themes. So are you ready, Joe?
I'm ready. I don't have a ton of notes, but I have a lot of quotes, I would say, because this is a very dialogue heavy episode.
Cool. Well, let's get into it.
All right. So we open on a very large room, very foreboding. It's very blacked out. Almost looks like it's in a giant warehouse or something. And there's what do you call him? The
Subaltern?
I'll call him the sub.
The sub.
The sub is a man seated at the table with a microphone in front of him, and then looming above him on a very large dais is like an altar almost, is another man who has a microphone. And off camera we hear Wordsworth, Romney, obsolescence. And the subaltern turns around and says, "He's waiting, Chancellor." And the Chancellor says, "Order him in." Which, if you don't remember the Chancellor, he was in, was it Third from the Sun or something?
Yeah, Third from the Sun.
Yeah.
And it's Fritz Weaver who's in just so much stuff.
I
glossed over a little bit of his. The reason I did is because we got more into his story when we did the episode about Third from the Sun. So I figured if you want to know more about him, just go back to that.
It's a good one. Let's order him in. And then the man at the table says, Wordsworth, Romney, obsolescence. So what I noticed also throughout this, and I won't mention this again, but the audio for me at least was out of sync with some of the actors' mouth movements.
Oh, I didn't.
And notice. I don't know if that was some stuff that was dubbed over later, but like especially at the end, which we'll get to. But there's some really interesting slices there. I don't think it really matters that much. It's more of just kind of establishing, I think, a tone for the audio. But they did use vocal inflection a few different times here. And if you know anything about Burgess Meredith, his legendary voice, he's got so much strength in that voice where he can portray kind of a humbleness and strength at the same time, which I think is exactly the point of this episode. So
yeah, he's got a lot of gravitas, like great narrating voice too. Burgess Meredith is just fantastic. He doesn't know too much about it. Yeah.
He's got like a lot of vulnerability in that voice too, which there's some moments where I really love when that comes out. And then in this room, there are a bunch of men and women standing, just kind of in very plain clothes on either side of the room. And there's a menacing drum beat that starts as Burgess Meredith kind of walks into the room as our protagonist. And we get the voiceover. You walk into this room at your own risk because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and a more sophisticated approach to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy, and truth is a menace. This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth in his last 48 hours on Earth. He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated because he's built out of flesh and because he has a mind. Mr. Romney Wordsworth will draw his last breaths in the Twilight Zone.
It's amazing, like in this opening, like we're watching this again. These episodes are a little in advance, but this is still, I'm sure, top of the news when you're hearing this. The murder of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis by ICE agents. So like, it's it's so wild to see this in motion, almost blatantly, like in the news, and the way that the White House handled that feels so much like to watch this episode during that while that's still fresh makes it play so much more powerfully than it did to me the last time I saw it. But like the fact that everyone's dressed in the same uniforms, essentially, the citizenry and the administration. They all have these like diamonds on their collars.
Yeah.
It's all very, it's exactly what it's supposed to be, like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. It's like that. It's that level of commentary on the state controlling us.
Conformity and the line that really stands out to me is that iron rule. The
Yeah.
logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. And I just feel that, you know, I'm, for those who don't know, I'm based in Minnesota, and the, you know, this experience has just been, there's been a lot of talk around it. And I think there's a lot of, has been a lot of feeling of, you know, I think a lot of people experience this, that couldn't happen here, that shouldn't happen here. And the fact that it did is really, I mean, hopefully it jars people into action, because it's madness. If you've seen the video and not, you know, go to a reputable news organization, any of them, whether you're left or right leaning, and you can watch the video and decide for yourself. But really, it's terrifying. The idea that this was all happening, and as a person is trying to drive away, appears to be very clearly trying to drive away. Imagine yourself in that driver's seat, and there's someone right in front of you who then pulls out a gun and shoots you because you're trying to get out of this area. And it's
I've had closer calls in a grocery store parking lot as a pedestrian than that ICE agent had in that video.
Yeah.
And I didn't kill anybody in response.
Right. And the over the top response that President Trump had on on X or whatever, Truth or whatever social thing he posted on, that, you know, it's amazing he's alive. It's like, come on. Are we all just going to make this up all the time about how extreme this was? There's
a brainwashing happening and a gaslighting. And the thing is, they're even releasing photos of the last time he was involved in an incident like this, in the context of trying to say that those were the injuries that he suffered in this incident, when it was something that happened long ago in his career, longer ago.
Yeah.
Where he had, again, he was, my understanding is like climbing through the details right now. We're not part of anything like that. Yeah. We're just talking about from the social and the storytelling standpoint right now. But like the idea that you could put forward, you know, this guy looks grievously injured in one thing, but that's not from this incident.
Right.
You know, so there is like, there's a trickery happening in the way that the story's they're trying to shape it to protect this whole industry of deporting people they've created. It's fucking nuts.
Yeah. So we don't have to get into that deep now here. I mean, this is not a political commentary podcast. However, as you listen to this episode, as you listen to our description of it and the dialogue in this, you know, it's interesting to see the parallels, and more than interesting, it's important to see the parallels, to recognize that this is a cautionary tale. This is a cautionary tale in the 60s about people who are misguided in their quest for conformity, in their quest for utility, in trying to drive their meaning forward. And this librarian, who is an exception to all of this exception, and if you are somebody who is more conservative, if you feel a slightly more a person of faith, where you might be someone who looks at Burgess Meredith in this, who it reveals himself to be a person of faith. You know, look at how these characters are interacting. Look at how this is unfolding, and think find the parallels in your life, and look at it for yourself. Everybody's got to figure this stuff out for themselves. Don't listen to someone else telling you what is what. Like, go evaluate it. Think about how you really feel, but put yourself in people's situations. Put yourself in their shoes, their sandals, if you will, and
just trust your gut too. Like,
yeah,
if you feel
introspection,
if you're dealing with real evidence that's unaltered evidence, you get as much of it as you can. And then if you still feel one way or the other, then there's no change in your mind anyway. But
Right.
and in the context of this and the religious aspect that you just referenced, it could be anything. It's interesting because Serling at least was raised Jewish, so he became
I didn't know that.
he became a Unitarian, I think, like late in life. But it's not important that he's quoting Psalms in this. Burgess Meredith's character with Wordsworth.
Yeah.
It's that he has anything that is not written by the government. It could have been anything, any book. It could have been Green Eggs and Ham. But the most effective example, I think, is for him to be looking at a text that has survived for 2,000 years or whatever. Like this idea of there being an ancient text and it has more weight, that's the thing he's not allowed to have.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the thing that strikes me upon this viewing, and actually I gotta be honest, I don't know that I'd ever seen this. I think I remember aspects of like the idea of it and like certain scenes I've probably seen pictures of, but to actually watch the whole episode. And again, people know I usually watch these twice and try and take it in the first time and then the second time kind of do a more analysis. And it was interesting to see the demeanor and the parallels and the mirroring that they do to develop the story, but also the ways in which Wordsworth really finds a piece in exactly who he is without trying to force anything on the state, because the state is continually forcing this on him, right?
Yeah.
So there's a difference between a freedom to do what you choose and being free, you know, like he's the chancellor is like, boy, you could have been more useful. But you know, you didn't quite make it. So, you know, we're putting this on you. So
also it speaks to the fact that it's not that the penalty is just death for being determined as obsolete. It feels like there might be like a road to continued life, but a compromised version of life.
Right.
And the fact that Wordsworth won't accept that version of his life, he would rather die, is that live free or die thing, you know?
There is a moment where he suggests that if he begs for his life, a senior official might take pity on him. And that's we've finally broken you, you know?
Yeah.
That's that piece of it. It's so, well, let's get into it. So, Romney Wordsworth has been under investigation for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months and has been found obsolete and is now having a hearing to make a finding on the matter and a sentence accordingly, which Wordsworth says he understands. He professes his occupation to be a librarian, which draws kind of like a murmur and some laughter from the crowd, which is never shown. It's just kind of offsite. Like you imagine him in this kind of big stadium-ish area, and prompts the chancellor to ask Wordsworth if he's had counsel and knows his rights. So that they do make it, you know, this kind of a trial-like, an official-like situation. Wordsworth slowly backs out of the spotlight as this is happening, and the chancellor starts talking to him and then immediately commands him to walk back into the light, so get back into the spotlight. And he states that he's told Wordsworth has had counsel and has been given orientation, but it's not clear to the chancellor's mind that Wordsworth really understands the purpose of the hearing. So here we'll get to the first set of quotes here. The investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. This finding carries with it serious implications. Do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Wordsworth, clearly shaken but still resolute, kind of nods. And he says, now I'll ask you again your occupation. And Wordsworth says, I am a librarian, sir.
I'm a dancer.
I am a librarian, sir. That is my occupation. That is my profession. If you people call that obsolete, and the man at the table, the subaltern, turns around and says, request clarification of the term. And Chancellor says, yes, the term, Mr. Wordsworth, you people, you make reference to the state? And Wordsworth says, I make reference to the state. And you persist in declaring your occupation as being a librarian. Is that correct? That is correct, sir. And in a mocking tone, the chancellor says, a librarian having to do with books. And Wordsworth says, yes, sir, books.
And it just like, it feels like this is another side to Henry Bemis from Time Enough at Last. He loved his books.
Yeah, yeah. And the chancellor, but since there are no more books, Mr. Wordsworth, there are no more libraries. And of course, it follows that there is very little call for the services of a librarian. Case in point, a minister. A minister would tell us that his function is that of preaching the word of God. And of course, it follows that since the state has proven that there is no God, that would make the function of a minister somewhat academic as well. And Wordsworth comes back with, there is a God. And this causes a murmur as well.
I love that this too, and again, people can take different meanings away from this. Like, I think some people watch this episode and they're like, oh, this is just a pro-Christian story. But it's more than that. It is, yes, within that you could argue that. But it really is any idea that is bigger than the state.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the piece. When I first watched this, I'm not a person of faith. I grew up very young in the Catholic Church. And then when I got married, I got into the Methodist Church, and then actually was never a member of it, but then we brought our kids up at an Episcopal church after the first Episcopal gay bishop was ordained in that church, and then spent some time there. I was a youth group leader for over 10 years, and really just for social justice. But I've never been a person of faith. I have went from agnostic to atheist, and even with all of that, I can still look at this and appreciate, as hopefully a person who is an atheist can see across the board, people find things in faith. I mean, it is a resource. It is a power. It is a source of hope. It's a part of their experience. And I'm not going to deny that of anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I might pick on you. I might pick on you lightly. I was brought up in the Baptist. I wasn't like, my parents weren't church people, but they kind of had their own thing religiously. And but I became, after being a kid in a youth group, and you know what I mean, being that, I eventually came to the point where I just couldn't process the idea anymore of there being a God. It just didn't make sense to me, and I became an atheist essentially. And but now the older I get, I do get the idea. I'm like, I understand, like, some people need that, and that has such great value. And why would you ever want to take that away from somebody if that's the thing that's giving them their strength? Like, as long as they're not, meeting cruelty out on other people in the name of their religion, then I'm like, it's so beautiful.
It's honestly a centering force. It's a centering. It's like, it gives it, for a lot of people, it gives the meaning to life. It gives, like, this is why I'm here. It's purpose, right?
Yeah.
And when I was in the youth group, it's funny, we joined this church, we were invited on a little retreat as a new family, and I had just my wife at the time, and our daughter, who was really young, didn't come on the retreat with us. It was all an adult retreat group together, and we were sitting out in the courtyard, and I was talking to the person who was the head of that church, who was the rector, and I said, I'd like to be involved with the church. And actually, the thing is I like working with youth. I really, I remember being a kid and going to youth groups at churches where I felt really uncomfortable, and I felt like there wasn't a place for me there, because there was a requisite. Like, you had to conform, you had to be a believer. And I was like, I'm not. I know that about myself.
Well, part of it for me was, as in a youth group, and as I began to think for myself as a teenager, more, one of the things was they would like to prompt you, the leaders of this particular church, they would like to prompt you with scenarios that they already had the answer to, but they weren't, they were matters of opinion. They weren't really factual things, but then an example would be, is Buddhism compatible with Christianity? Can you be a Christian and also adhere to Buddhist beliefs? So to me, I say, of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer that this particular church was, their youth group was, no, you can't, because that's against God. That's putting another God in there. And that
their interpretation of it. Yeah, of course.
Is that you can't bring in aspects of another religion into their religion, was their ruling on it.
Yeah. And that's what I'd encountered too. That kind of nope, you're not meeting the rules.
Right. And that's when the church becomes the state. And that's always the part where, like, throughout history, when the church literally is the state, that's really when it gets ugly. When the church is just there as a spiritual place and a place that supports their community and all that, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And what was cool about this in this moment when we were talking in this courtyard, and I said to this person, I said, I want to work with you. I'd like that, but the thing is I'm not Christian. I said, I don't believe, but I'm not opposed to the lessons. I mean, I think there's so much good that comes out of that. I'm just not a person who's going to dictate that to somebody. And she said, I'll never forget. It was just this great moment, because she'd been turns out, I didn't find out later, she'd been looking for a youth group leader for somebody in the community, or somebody to drive that in the community, because she couldn't do it herself. I didn't have the time. And she said, Joe, we're a group of people who like to walk together. If you would like to walk with us, we would love that.
Did they ever address like how to handle it if a kid asked you if you believed in God or not?
Yeah. She said, be honest.
Yeah.
She said, just say it. And actually, I told the kids on multiple occasions. It's funny because we started out, our first session, I think, was like 5, maybe 4 or 5 kids. And I was very upfront with them. I said, look, I'm here because I'm here to help have conversations with you. I want to be an adult that you can have conversations with. I want to bring up and have thought-provoking discussions about stuff. I want to introduce new ideas and new people to you, and have you think, because this is about you figuring stuff out, And so I really was involved with the social justice social justice aspects of that experience, and it really got engaging. And the rector, she would often come in, and then she would lead kind of a little thing. And she, I mean, obviously she's a person of faith. And she would talk about her experience, and I would talk about my experience, and it was never a conflict. There was no dissension. It wasn't like, oh, you're leading these kids away.
You said leading these kids away.
Kids away. Clang, 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 as I knock over on my water bottle.
Yeah.
It was never that experience. It was always a synergy.
Yeah.
And at the end, one of the most beautiful things, we'd have all the kids in the whole room kind of gather around, and we would light a candle in the center of the room. And we would basically do a meditation, and we would say it. This is a quiet time. We never use the word prayer. We never use the word necessarily meditation. We would just say, this is a time for you to have some quiet time, some reflection time. If you want to pray, awesome. If you want to meditate, awesome. If you want to just sit there with your eyes closed, there's not a lot of times as a teenager where you just to get time to have quiet and peace and be surrounded by people who are doing the same thing.
Time enough at last.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And the thing is, and I did it for, like I said, like 10 years. We grew that group from those 5 kids to, at one point, we had 30 plus kids coming, and we had to divide them into different groups because there's just too many to have in one spot. But they loved that piece at the end.
Yeah.
That quiet meditation. And if you know anybody, any teenagers in your life, and you want to connect with them, she gave me 3 simple rules. She's like, I didn't go through any official training other than safe church training. That's kind of mandatory for that. But basically she said, show up, listen, and do no harm. And honestly, that you want to connect with a teenager, show up and listen.
Yeah.
And just have a conversation. Don't try and be cool with them. Don't try and do something you're not. Don't do it. You just show up and you have a conversation. We're super digressing now, I realize. But
it's all connected to the Obsolete Man, though, in a way.
It is. And so anyway, in that experience, it worked awesome. And it was a beautiful thing. And then I just wanted my Wednesday nights back at one point. So,
yep. And it's firing along. You got it going.
Yeah.
And you have a legacy left behind, and hopefully they're doing right by you.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So, the Chancellor, so jumping back, Wordsworth declares there is a God, which just launched that prior conversation. The Chancellor continues to insist that Wordsworth is in error, and he grabs his microphone, he starts gesticulating, and you can see that there's parallels to, a rally speech or something like that, where he's speaking into the microphone. The state has proven there is no God, which they never lay out. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be interesting, like if they tried to explain how they said there was no God? But then I was like, well, that doesn't matter. The state can just say,
yeah,
the state can just reinforce. And that's the piece that I tie to today, where if they just say it enough, it becomes true.
People believe
that scares me.
Well,
that's the part.
Yeah. Well, it made me think of Kristi Noem and J.D. Vance. When they would come out again, I'm going back to this most recent killing. At the time of this recording, sadly, I hate to say that, but who knows what's happened in the interim.
Right.
But, it is, if you watch the Kristi Noem, the initial one, especially the cowboy hat speech, it's familiar. You'll recognize what an authoritarian sounds like when you hear that, or you hear the way J.D. Vance, they break it down with a certainty. The certainty is a part of the persona of being a dictator. Public certainty about everything you know. You're never wrong. You just maybe get bad data, but you don't really look at any of the data going into it. You just present your narrative, and you present it as if it's facts.
And you can never back down from it. You can never say, I was wrong, or we were wrong, or there's new information that corrects this, which defies logic and defies reason and defies truth.
Yeah.
It's
there was a time when, they would be like, that's a display of weakness, with something I think people were just kind of in Western cultures were taught. Never admit when you're wrong. It's always spending, never apologize. I mean, some people have probably worked for businesses where they're like, never apologize for anything. Yeah. Because it's liability, Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a very common male thing too, that we're taught that, or at least early on. And I feel like that kind of backed off some, at least as I've been growing up. And I think there's more focus on critical thinking, which is not, don't be wrong. It's work to understand what's actually happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I love. I love that turn in education. So they go back to, so they're doing this saying that they prove that there is no God. The state has proved there's no God. And Wordsworth said that God cannot be erased by an edict, which clearly agitates the chancellor, who repeats that Wordsworth is obsolete. So he can't argue with what Wordsworth is saying. He doesn't have the word skill, which I love the Wordsworth. And that actually comes up in a second here. He says, when he calls Wordsworth obsolete again, Wordsworth says it's a lie and that no man is obsolete. And the chancellor calls him an anachronism, a ghost from another time. And then there's I'm going to quote the next piece here. Wordsworth says, I am nothing more than a redeemer that you cannot destroy truth by burning pages. And Chancellor says, you're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning. I am a human being. Chancellor, you're a librarian. Mr. Wordsworth. You're a dealer in books and 2-cent fines and pamphlets and closed stacks and the musty insides of a language factory that spews out meaningless words in an assembly line. Words, Mr. Wordsworth, that have no substance or dimension.
You
like
host
air.
Drag Queen Story Hour.
Like air, like wind, like vacuum that you make believe has an existence by scribbling index numbers on your little cards. Wordsworth says, I don't care. I tell you, I don't care. I'm a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought aloud, that thought lives, even after I've shoveled into my grave. Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions that you inject into your veins with printer's ink. The narcotics that you call literature, the Bible, poetry, essays, all of it an opiate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs, a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Your spindly limbed kind.
And he says, you waste. Oh, so through this, he's been getting more and more agitated and more animated. Again, very much like a rally. And at this point, he calms down and puts the microphone down and says, you're a waste of our time, Mr. Wordsworth. And you're not worth the waste.
You also got
instruct him.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, it's right.
I just wanted to point out in this moment that it's like he has done. You get the feeling that the chancellor has done this same spiel over and over again. Because it never changes. Like his way of thinking doesn't change. The state doesn't change. Like, so he's just doing this probably to 1,000 other people that had jobs at the state.
The tear down and tear down and tear down. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just so sure. It's all, again, it's the thing because he never had the books. He never had anything to like compromise his thinking and change him from this one track of being the chancellor. And that's all he is.
Well, and again, it's that mentality where if you are never wrong, then every time you speak, you are speaking more truth, and so you become utterly convinced that everything you're saying. And he's tearing him down on a personal level, which again is all these personal attacks are a reflection that you can't comment on his character.
Yeah,
you have to attack him as a person.
It's another thing we see. In politics, still in the, it's not new, but it's also like everyone sees it more because of media being what it is now. It's the personal stuff. It just shows that there's a gap in that person's knowledge, what they're working with when
it's
they
name calling.
Yeah. They're just like, and again, it speaks to he never had the books. The chancellor couldn't even fill in the gaps and really explain why things were the way they were, because they like you said, it's predetermined. They know it all. They figured it all out because they say they did.
Exactly. And they're this is a future that is so dystopian because there's how do you come back from that? You don't.
Yeah.
It's
also it's like they have he has an apartment. He has like a room. So like, it's also a functioning society, but is that worth it? You know what I mean? Like when you see that he has a place to live, he has food, he has the basics of civilization. And I think dictators, they rely on you being like afraid of losing the basics. And being like, we can give you the basics will be there for you. The very, very, very basics will be there for you as long as you're willing to be part of the system.
Right. Which is, if you ever watch Wall-E, you realize how terrifying that movie is and how dystopian it is.
Yeah. Really.
Because there's all these people going around under the auspices of ultimate pleasure and having everything done for them. And you're like, none of these people has autonomy of even their bodies.
Yeah. Yep. And the better the basics get, the harder it is to incite any type of change from grassroots. You know what I mean? Because the more comfortable your life is at the bottom, the less likely you are to revolt against the top.
And the people who want to manipulate you at the top are going to cater to that, to tell you you should be comfortable. You shouldn't be discomfortable. You shouldn't be uncomfortable talking about things like race or gender. You should be comfortable. You should have things the way you want them to be. They should be that way that we're going to reinforce and drive home. And it's like, oh, yeah, it could be so much better.
Yeah.
So following the kind of bitter exchange with the chancellor, the chancellor and the board find Wordsworth obsolete and sentences him to be liquidated within 48 hours, allowing him to choose his method and the exact time and place of execution as long as it is within 48 hours. Wordsworth requests to be granted a personal assassin who will be the only one who knows the method of his death, and also one more, that he have an audience and his execution be televised nationwide from his room at midnight on the following day. And although his demand is, kind of odd or unprecedented, the chancellor grants both, thinking, well, and after Wordsworth gets dismissed, he goes to the subaltern. He says, it's to our advantage. He says, we'll have a viewing audience so they can see what it looks like, the death of a librarian.
It's also not the first time. They insinuate that they've done it before, broadcast executions.
And they do mention at one point later, we'll get into that. It's referenced actually in just a moment. So we clip to after commercial, comes back, and it's 11:15 the following night. The chancellor visits Wordsworth in his now monitored room, responding to a Wordsworth invitation out of curiosity. And Wordsworth explains that he thinks the chancellor responded to his request not because, for chancellor's reasons. The chancellor says, well, we're showing the people that, that we're not afraid of you, and you don't, challenge us. And Wordsworth's like, what a burden you have to show that you're not afraid of me, a librarian. So the whole state comes and shows that they're not afraid of me, a librarian. He goes, I think the real reason you're here, even though I don't think you admit it to yourself, is I don't fit your formulae. Which I love that way he says it.
You're a punk ass bitch.
And so then the cameras come on, and Wordsworth goes, well, we're being televised now. And the chancellor says, it's not unusual that we televise executions, Mr. Wordsworth. Last year, in the mass executions, we televised around the clock. 1,300 people were put to death in less than 6 hours. And Wordsworth turns to him and says, you never learn, do you? History teaches you nothing. On the contrary, history teaches us a great deal. We had predecessors who had the beginnings of the right idea. And Wordsworth says, yes, Hitler. Hitler, of course. Stalin too, but their error was not one of excess. It was simply not going far enough. Too many undesirables were left around, and undesirables eventually form a core of resistance. Old people, for example, clutch at the past and won't accept the new. The sick, the maimed, and the deformed. They fasten onto the healthy body and damage it, so we eliminate them. And people like yourself, they can perform no useful function for the state, so we put an end to them.
Sound familiar, everybody?
Yeah. When you hear about, I know, now people, as I read that, I'm like, oh, remember when people made that thing about, what did Hillary Clinton call Trump supporters?
Oh, deplorables.
Deplorables, which they seized on and were like, yeah. And it's like, no, yeah, that was bullshit. That was not cool. She shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, it was a bad idea.
Yeah, it was really shitty. It reveals the same manipulation from her side. However, I will say, not however, in addition, I will say that is being emphasized and amplified when you talk about shithole countries, and you say you're going to take in immigrants from certain countries and not others. It's shaping the world in the image that you think it should be, which is just messed up.
Well, that's something I think the left struggles with. is not sinking to that level. It's hard to not just meet the same type of attitude with the same, and I think that like that's kind of what she fell into. My question, did she lose votes from people that would have voted for Trump? You know what I mean? Like, is there anybody out there in this world that would have voted for her had she not said that?
Right.
Is the question I always come back to. But what it comes down to is it muddied the thought process around the voters' thought process.
Right.
Like had you not done that, it would have seemed like at least it would have been a little more clear. The difference is, the kind of respect that you're going to give to your opposition. Well, like, is that Michelle Obama aim high thing? Go high.
Yeah.
Which just, I don't know, man. We're in a weird place right now. What works?
Well, and I think that's what's really, I don't know, it disturbs me is the idea that there's a lot of people who really want to use the same tactics. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the character. That you're going to lose your own base in doing some of that. Right. However, like I get where people are like, oh, I want them to fight back. Come on, be vicious, be mean. It's like, well, it's cliche, but that's given into the dark side, isn't it?
I think there's a medium ground you can hit where you are tough, impassioned, certain of your mission, and you can do all those things, and it can look like aggression and anger and meanness and everything else, because politics is a war.
Yeah,
it's a war that's happening in politics, especially right now here. So I'm always like, as I'm someone who's not a politician, I look at that stuff. I'm like, what is it? What is the right answer? I don't know. It's so complex. Like, do you sacrifice your values to get the power because you feel you can make the world a better place? But the only way to get there is to act exactly like your opposition. That it's confusing to us as voters. Yeah. It may make sense to you as a politician that's you do what you've got to do.
Yeah.
But it confuses society in a really bad way.
But I think also the people who are driving this, and I don't want to go too long because I know you've got other stuff we got to get to too. But there are people who are giving examples of another way of doing it. It's just you don't have to focus on all the negative or personal attacks and all the rest of that stuff. It's just
you don't have to.
Yeah.
But you do.
Yeah. I think a lot of people at that level, it's hard to see what the public sees. Yeah. You know what I mean?
They start peppering in profanity into their speeches and stuff.
Yep.
And it's not that they felt like going out there and saying the F word today.
Yeah.
They thought of it in advance. They talked to their team, most likely both sides. I've talked to their team. Is today the day I drop the F-bomb? Is this the moment that I go out there and I talk plainly to people or not? And everything is calculated. You watch Veep.
Yeah.
Did you watch Veep?
No.
Veep is a great sitcom. It just kind of reveals, and I think it was Barack Obama said Veep is the most accurate representation of what Washington politics is like. If you want to know the reality of it, that Veep is the closest thing.
Huh.
Yeah. And it's very cynical.
Interesting. So after this tirade where the chancellor says he's going to eliminate everyone, he makes some creepy small talk with Wordsworth, just kind of trying to, manipulate him a little bit more and looking for more opportunities to demean Wordsworth and remind him of his obsolescence while on camera. And then he reminds Wordsworth that he's about to die and trivializes his life and mocks his belief in like a nirvana or a heaven after death and taunts him for not facing the camera. And then Wordsworth makes it clear he won't be crying or wringing his hands or pleading for his life, as the chancellor suggests. Maybe you should. And he kind of gets down on his level. He's like, if you look into the camera, you sure you don't want to do that? Because someone might try and spare your life. And that's the compromise. Come on. If you just break, it could be good for you. You might live.
I'm not a bad guy.
Yeah.
I'm just doing what my country needs. Daddy's home. Daddy's home. It's time for you to act like a child and beg for forgiveness.
just follow along.
Yeah.
And when Wordsworth makes it clear he's not going to do that, Chancellor stands and says, well, fine, I can't stay. I have another appointment this evening, and moves to the door to leave. And I'll quote another piece here. Chancellor, make it brief, Wordsworth. You have plenty of time. You're not going anywhere. How's that? I'm afraid I haven't been very fair with you. I invited you here for a very special reason. Would you like to know the method that I've chosen for my liquidation? Well, in a very few moments, here in this room, a bomb is going off. Very thoughtful, Mr. Wordsworth. Relatively quick and painless death. Yes, isn't it? However, knowing that you're going to be blown to smithereens in a few moments isn't the happiest thought in the world, is it? Is it? That depends on the individual, Mr. Wordsworth. Indeed it does. And as the Chancellor says that, he's reaching for the door and realizes it's locked.
Oh, I've chosen death by snoo, and you have to watch.
Oh, God. What kind of idiocy is this, Mr. Wordsworth? You've locked the door. Oh, yes. Yes, I've locked the door. Now, question. And this is where Wordsworth turns to the camera. How does a man react to the knowledge that he is going to be blown to bits within half an hour? Answer. Well, that depends on the individual. So you can see he's starting to mirror these things back to the Chancellor. And it's interesting, we never get the Chancellor's name. He's not named because he's just the thing.
Yeah, you don't want to think of him as an individual character because he represents so much.
Right. So it's at this time that Wordsworth stands and he goes to his safe and pulls out his long hidden Bible and says that he, as an individual, is going to spend his last moments reading his Bible to comfort himself. And he points out, as the Chancellor bangs on the door and starts calling for guards, that the Chancellor is not facing the cameras. He also points out that the Chancellor is isolated because that's something the Chancellor put in place, that those to be liquidated, the obsolete should be isolated, which again is another divide and conquer tactic. The Chancellor says, I'm beginning to understand the shoe on the other foot. That's the idea, isn't it? It's one thing for someone like yourself to do a little cringing and pleading, but what a choice opportunity to show a member of the state doing likewise. But you're insane, Wordsworth, if you think they'll let me stay in here. They? I ask clarification for the term they. Oh, you mean the state? Again, reflecting what happened earlier in the episode. Oh, I think they'll sit on their hands for a while. They wouldn't want to miss this scene. Besides, the act of rescue would be very demeaning to them. They have to break in here to rescue a high-ranking member of the state, to snatch him out of the soup, so to speak. No, I think they won't help you. I misjudged you, Wordsworth. You underestimated me. You wanted the whole country to see the way that a librarian dies. Well, let the whole country see the way an official of the state dies too. Face the cameras, step into the light. Let the whole country see the strength of the state, the resilience of the state, the courage of the state. Let the whole country see the way a valiant man of steel faces his death. You have a nirvana coming up too. Why don't you just sit down? We'll have a little chat, just you and me, the great equalizer. 'Cause death is the great equalizer. Again, Wordsworth faces the camera. So here you have this strong, handsome, uniformed, bemedaled symbol of giant authority, and this insignificant librarian. And suddenly, in the eyes of God, there is precious little to distinguish us. And then the Chancellor says, we shall see, Wordsworth, we shall see. So Wordsworth and the Chancellor sit down, and you can see the Chancellor starts smoking a cigarette, and he's getting more and more agitated. And Wordsworth is very calmly reading the Psalms, Psalm 23 and other Psalms, as he is just relaxing, gently turning the pages as the Chancellor gets more and more restless. And in the final minute before midnight, the Chancellor breaks down and begs to be let go. In the name of God. And Wordsworth says, yes, in the name of God, I will let you go. And he gets up and gives him the key And the chancellor unlocks the door and jumps through just in time to avoid the bomb exploding, killing Wordsworth. And we come to the next scene. The chancellor enters this judgment room that we started in. And due to his cowardly display in Wordsworth's room in the invocation of God, the chancellor has been replaced by his subaltern, who is speaking a very robotic voice, which is very interesting. Adds another layer of that anonymity to the state. You can just be replaced by the next person in line. And as the chancellor protests this verdict, begging for his life and claiming he serves the state, I serve a purpose, the crowd around him starts gathering and condenses. And this is one of the truly chilling moments of this episode. They started with this very low droning sound that it sounds like might be even in the background, but it's all the people around him doing this. And it builds and builds and builds until it becomes a yell. It's a stunning scene because the sound of it is overwhelming. And as it does that, he runs away and the camera swings around and you see this really dramatic scene where he runs toward the dais and the chancellor tries to escape, but the tribunal people grab him and pull him back across the table until he disappears into the crowd. And we get the voiceover.
It's like a zombie movie at that point.
Yeah, it really is. The chancellor, the late chancellor, was only partly correct. He was obsolete. But so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for mankind in the Twilight Zone.
Perfect little statement. That should be printed on. Some people should have to see that quote on every church, like the little billboard where they put the clever sayings out front.
Yes. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man or people, that state is obsolete.
Yeah. Deep shit, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he makes that point and he's very, very puts the period on it and that's the end. So yeah. I thought it was a great episode. Again, I don't remember having watched the whole thing. So he does a promo after this for Where Is Everybody, which is interesting. I'm like, oh, that's the first time he's referenced back to another episode that has already aired because this is the last episode of season 2.
Yep. I wonder if they added another bumper when they re-aired. If they just kept, well, I guess if they just re-aired the whole first season again in the summer.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me exactly how they determined what they were going to do, but I don't know the story.
Right.
That was a good one. It really thought-provoking and deep. And if you like this episode or this idea, go support your local library. Go see your librarian. Be nice to them.
I got to tell you, just a quick hit for that. My girlfriend and I and her son went to our local library just the other day. It was awesome. We had checked in. We had to redo because we moved, but it was fantastic. And they have more resources than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
You can get access to consumer reports. You can get access to online training. You can get access to a ton of stuff. There's even they've got new one, like arts and crafts videos and stuff you can watch
and materials you can get.
Yeah.
I think you pay part of the cost of things, but they have like machines, like printing machines that do vinyl, all kinds of stuff.
Depending there's ones that you can do like video conversion, like from old videotapes and film. There's recording studios at some of these. I mean, it has updated for the times. If you can go to your local library, if they're well funded, which hopefully they are, it's amazing. You can get audiobooks. I read comic books from online all the time, and it's all free. It's all part of that state. So support it. They get their funding when you use their services.
Yeah. And it's still true that books, I know we don't read a lot of books anymore, but like they're there, people. 1984, Fahrenheit 451, your library probably has multiple copies of both of those books because they're so relevant still and you should read them.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you guys next week with our recap of season 2 of the Twilight Zone, and Matt Hoffman's coming back, and we're going to talk about our favorite episodes and moments.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Freddie. Thanks, everybody.